Good morning, everyone. Just a few minutes to wait for everyone to join. I hope it's a bright and shiny day, wherever you are. I'm based in Italy. Today, not extremely sunny, but good enough. And I would like to welcome everyone this morning. And just to let you know that this webinar is recorded. So in case you want to rewatch it or you need to leave earlier, you will find the recording on our website. So I will start by sharing my screen. All right. And if you do have any question, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A box so I can see it, basically. And I will try to answer the questions while I'm presenting, or depending on the question, I may set that for the end, depending on how long the question will require. Okay, I think we can get started. I'm Serena Di Cecilia. If you don't know me, I've been with FlowJo and BD for almost 6 years now. And I'm the Senior Informatics Solution Leader right now. So right here on the screen, you can find my email address. So in case you have any question or any troubleshooting you need, any doubt, you are free to email me. Right here, my email address is pretty difficult. It's my name and last name @bd.com. Please do not forget the dots, because otherwise I don't get your emails. And as you can see from my name, I'm Italian, but this training, of course, will be in English. So what are we going to talk about today? Today, I will introduce you to the topic of quality control and normalization, and how you can use the tools that we have available within FlowJo to get basically the best out of your data. And to get us started on this topic, I really like to present these, or to start with this paper that was published a few years ago, which actually includes all the steps to be performed in let's say, to have good results in your analysis, and especially in this case for high dimensional analysis. But the initial steps are actually valid for any kind of experiment that you are thinking of doing. This figure right here is extremely beautiful, and it's easy and accurate on whatever you need to do before actually moving into the actual analysis step. So as you can see from here, with the blue line, ideally, our experiment should start with a good panel design, and then we should plan ahead of time the experiment. The better we plan the experiment, the better will be the output after that. We should keep in account the instrument setting and the way how we acquire samples. It is important to keep in mind within our experiment that is really can be really let's say, can cause some troubles, the spread effect within our panel. So I would invite you to always double check your panel before you actually start your real experiment. We should always include relevant control samples within our experiment, and then we should ensure maximal standardization. So with this taken in account, we can then move on to the actual pre-processing steps, which will include compensation, transformation, quality control for signal stability, and then quality control for batch effect, and eventually remove any irrelevant events, such as, for example, doublets or dead cells, and so on. So now, today I will focus on the second part right here, but I just want to mention that in case you need any help with the initial steps, such as panel design, experimental design, and so on, all these steps can give you, let's say you can find some help for these steps in BD Research Cloud, which is our environment for collaboration. On the website, there are several webinars for BD Research Cloud, and it's a browser application, so you can actually access to BD Research Cloud for free by just using a portal account. While the second, third, and fourth, let's say, steps can be all performed within FlowJo. So just to give you a brief overview on what you can do before you actually start your experiment in the analysis in FlowJo, I just want to give you some tips on what you can do within BD Research Cloud to help you with this within the initial steps. So for panel design, you do have access to all panel design tools within BD Research Cloud, and you can also create panels for both conventional or spectral flow cytometry. So depending on the instrument that you are working on, you will find some help in designing your panels within this tool. You can also create experiments. So especially if you're working with a DIVA instrument, it will allow you to create experiments in the browser and then just export your experiment to the instrument, which is extremely useful when you do have many parameters, or you want to add keywords, or you want to add informations to your file, and you don't want to spend that much time at the instrument itself. So you can just go there and have your experiment ready. And of course, there are some other tools that can help you within this platform, such as the creation of workflows or the storage of your data and so on. And you will find all the information regarding your instrument, such as the configuration, which is one of the most important things to keep in mind when you are designing a panel for your experiment. Once you have taken advantage of all these tools, you can always store your data within BD Research Cloud, and there is a direct connection with FlowJo. So you can basically add your samples directly from BD Research Cloud. So if you ever opened up FlowJo, you may have noticed that on top right here, there is a BD icon. This drives you directly to the BD Research Cloud tab. So you can log in right away, or you can create a free account, a free portal account. Or if you go on Add Samples, you will find these Add Samples from BD Research Cloud right here. So this was just a brief introduction on the tool, but if you want to know more, there will be information on the website. There is a dedicated area to BD Research Cloud. There are videos on the FlowJo University, and there are webinars for that. So let's talk about our topic today. So what we need to consider before we move on to the actual analysis to evaluate the quality of our samples: compensation, first of all, and then the transformation of the data. QC, so a quality check for signal stability, and then eventually quality check for batch effect in case we are working in batches, or in case we are working in different days or different instruments and so on. And then removal of irrelevant events. So I will show you how you can do these things within FlowJo and how the tools within FlowJo can help you to overcome some issues you may encounter during your experiment. Okay, let me see. Let me pause for a second to see if there are questions. Looks like there are no questions. Okay, so let's start with evaluating the compensation. In FlowJo, there are several tools that can help you with that. If you don't know, you can calculate a new compensation matrix starting from single stain controls. This compensation can be for spectral or traditional flow cytometry. And then we just added a new algorithm for spectral effects, which is called spectral effects, which is basically applied to data that are coming from the latest instrument that was released from BD, which is the FACSDiscover S8, which is an imaging spectral cytometer that can go up to 78 different parameters. So you have all in there. If you have different compensation matrices, you can compare matrices within FlowJo. So you will see them into the compensation wizard, and you can highlight them right here on the top left corner, and you can overlay the compensation. So this way you can see which one is better fitting your data in case you have multiple compensation matrices. And one thing that can really be helpful in understanding how is the quality of your panel before moving on is the creation of the spread matrices, SSM or TSM, or the Cousin similarity matrix in case you are working with spectral data, which will give you, the last one will give you information about the similarities among dyes. So all of these tools are available within FlowJo, and I invite you to take advantage of this. We do have several webinars on compensation. The latest one was done a few months ago from my colleague team. So if you go under the Learn area on the FlowJo website, you will find these webinars that go way deeper into the compensation steps and how to do that within FlowJo. So this is not the goal of today's webinar, but I wanted to mention that you do have these tools within FlowJo. And then, of course, transformation. Here is just an example of how data look like without transformation and then with correct transformation. So it is really important to correctly transform our data in order to not miss something or to not have artifacts within our final analysis. Of course, there are different ways how you can transform the data within FlowJo, and you will find it under the T button within the graphical window. Then let's get into the good part, into the funny part. Although I know that many people do not perform quality check, it is actually a really important step. Evaluating the quality of our data can save us time later on and can avoid us to fall into, let's say, interpreting the data in a wrong way. So evaluating the signal stability in FlowJo can be done with a default tool, and then followed by manual gating, or with automated cleanup algorithms, okay? In case we are working with batches, we want to evaluate the batch effect and what are the differences within that. In FlowJo, there are ways how you can correct the batch effect computationally with normalization. And you can see right here, I've listed 3 algorithms that I will show you today as cytonorm, cycombine, and MNN. While for quality check, I've listed the 3 algorithms that we have available as FlowAI, FlowClean, and Peacock. And after that, you want to remove all irrelevant events such as doublets, dead cells, or debris, and so on. So where do I find all these algorithms that are available in FlowJo? If you open up your FlowJo and you go under Workspace plugins, you will see that there is a line on top. Even if you have never downloaded anything like that, you will see that there is a line on top that says FlowJo Exchange. If you click on that, you will be prompted to our web page, which is indeed the FlowJo Exchange, the web page where we have available all the different algorithms. So what are algorithms? Well, what are plugins? Plugins are algorithms that can extend the functionality of FlowJo. So you may not find them in FlowJo when you open up FlowJo for the first time, but you will find them as extra applications that can be downloaded. So if you go on the FlowJo Exchange, you will find the list of all the different algorithms available. And for the ones that I will be showing today, we do have a bundle which is called Plug and Play, which includes some of them. So Plug and Play was released a couple of years ago, and it's actually a lifesaver because when you download this bundle, you get all at once different plugins such as FlowAI and FlowClean for quality check. Then you have clustering plugins such as FlowSum, but you also have the cytonorm plugin for normalization, and then some other plugins for visualization, for example. While if you feel that there is the need of using the extra plugins that I will be showing, such as Peacock, SciCombine, or MNN, you will need to download them individually, as these are standalone plugins. Okay, so first of all, I see there's a question in the chat, which is, hi, how duplicate the compensation matrix and keep the transformation? To duplicate a compensation matrix, you need to edit and then create a copy. So basically, you will create a copy of the compensation matrix. Okay, so let's just okay, then I'll show this part later. Then I will also show you how to download these plugins and install them onto your FlowJo. Oops. Okay, so what is the purpose of quality control? When we acquire our samples, there may be surges in the flow rate or fluctuations in signal, or eventually fluorescence events outside the dynamic range. When we have these alterations, we create some anomalies in our data. And these anomalies are actually troubles for us. So if you look at this example right here, what we see is that for our CD3, for example, if we do not perform QC, we may think that there is an extra population right here at the bottom left corner. But when we plot CD3 versus time, which is actually a general control that we do, right? We want to check the signal stability over time for each parameter. We see that there was a problem at the beginning of the acquisition right here. So what we would normally do would be plotting each parameter versus time and then make sure that everything is fine. In this case, it looks like something was not fine. So we don't want to include these kind of events within our analysis because these are not considered as reliable events. Something was wrong. So we need to exclude this area. So what we do a manual gate around here, and then we move on. So we realize that after QC, this population is actually gone. So this could have been an artifact if we didn't have performed any quality check or any check on our data before proceeding. So how can we else, what else can we do within FlowJo? There is a default tool within FlowJo that allows to inspect the files. So if you click on the small circle next to your FCS files and you double click on that, that will basically allow you to inspect the specific file. And what it will do, it will plot the median of each parameter versus time. Okay, so what you see here, the green line is the median value and the two dot lines are the two standard deviations. Now, as long as the median value is included into the two standard deviations, it means that there were no alterations during the acquisition. So basically we didn't have clogs or bubble air or nothing that could compromise our data. So then if everything was okay, FlowJo will give you a badge color next to your file, which can go from green to red based on the number of alterations that we had. Okay, and these can also be applied to the entire data set just by going on the check sample quality tool that is available right away within FlowJo. So it is not an extra tool, it is a default tool that is available within FlowJo. Okay, I will take this question later on. So I see that there is a Q&A. Okay, so once we check the quality of the samples by using the default tool within FlowJo, we still need to clean up manually on time. Because if there are alterations, what we get is a warning. So FlowJo will not clean up our data automatically, but will give us a warning that can be, for example, in the red case, it's like very high number of flows. during the acquisition. So in that case, we need to go manually, and eventually we can start by plotting physical parameter versus time. And as you see in this example, there are the alterations right here. So if I need to make a gate, I will try to keep as many events as possible and then exclude the area, the interval of time where something was wrong. Okay, so the time gate will be just making this and taking all the good events or all the events that I think could be reliable. And this is the default way within FlowJo of checking the quality. What about automatic algorithms to clean up the samples? So for that, we have FlowAI, FlowClean, and Peacock. These are 3 algorithms available under as plugins for FlowJo. These algorithms are able to inspect the FCS files and remove events which are basically anomalies. And what they give us back are high quality events. So this is the same file as before, but cleaned up automatically by using one of these 3 algorithms. So if we look closer to each of these algorithms, we see that FlowClean, FlowClean was the first one developed, 2016, so almost 10 years when they developed FlowClean. And the major goal of FlowClean is to extract bins, which are interval of times, where there are shifts in population distributions. This algorithm needs to work on raw data, so whatever you export from the instrument, you can then run FlowClean on that, but it does not create any visual report. So the check is done on the flow rate, and it will not give us any visual report except for 2 populations created in FlowJo. I will show all of this within FlowJo after the introduction. Yes, no worry, Irene. I will show this in FlowJo after I go through all these algorithms. Then I will show everything live within FlowJo. So no worries. Okay. Okay, so after FlowClean, it was released FlowAI. FlowAI is another algorithm that actually makes 3 different checks, not only one on the flow rate, but checks the flow rate, the signal acquisition, and the dynamic range. So basically, whenever you have drops or spikes in the flow rate, this algorithm identifies these alterations and removes the event within this interval of time. And the same goes for whenever there is a change point in signal acquisition or when there are events which are outside of the dynamic range of the instrument, which could be either negative events or positive events. Okay. Also, this algorithm uses raw data. So this means as well that when you export your files from the instrument, you want to run either FlowAI or FlowClean right away on that file. And it creates a really nice report with a text summary. So what you will see will be an auto QC report where you have all the information on the file. So basically the file name and the number of events, and then you will have a summary of what happened during these checks, okay? So it gives you the percentage of events that were removed, about 23.55%, and the number of high quality events that were given back. Then you have an information about the flow rate. So right here, you can see the flow rate all the way through the acquisition. And you see how many events were removed based on anomalies within the flow rate. Wherever you see these circles right here, this indicates where the events were removed. And there are a bunch of events removed at the end of the acquisition, which is kind of expected, right? When we run our samples right at the beginning and right at the end of the acquisition, we do expect changes. So this is kind of expected. Then you have an evaluation of the signal acquisition and how many events were removed based on signal acquisition. In this case, about 17% of the events. And right here, you see the median intensity value for the signal acquisition over time. And then finally, you will see the dynamic range checks. So how many events were excluded based on the dynamic range of the instrument. And this is less than 1%, so everything is fine. And the last one, which is Peacock. Peacock is actually, let's say, one of the, I believe, the best ones out there, but this is my personal opinion, so don't take it wrong. So Peacock uses a completely different approach, or a slightly different approach, let's say, because it extracts time bins with events which are easily clustered out from the rest of the data. So anything that is, let's say, considered as a cluster of cells which are outliers based on peak density will be excluded. And will also flags monotonic changes. So here is just a summary of what of all the different steps that Peacock performs. But if you want to go way deeper into that, we do have one webinar on Peacock specifically. So, and it's from my colleague Veronica, who is also the one that made most of these slides right here. So thank you, Veronica, by the way. What you see as a pre-processing, these algorithms can be used on spectral files, traditional flow cytometry files, and on CyTOF files. So, of course, you will need to either perform unmixing or traditional compensation on the files before. So in this case, it works on compensated data, and then it will apply the transformation and then the cleanup. So it creates a really nice visual report and has robust default settings. Okay. So this is one of the examples of output when running Peacock. As you can see here, you have information about the number of events that were removed when using Peacock. And as you can see, where you have this, let's say, violet line, it's basically the interval of time where the events were removed. And you can see here the flow rate actually goes down, and that's what creates the removal of the events. And when the median deviates, the median value deviates. And here you can see all the different markers that were used and how the flow rate, the signal basically was for each individual marker. Again, what you will have in FlowJo will be an output made of bad events and good events. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the three different algorithms, this table right here is extremely useful. So you will have information regarding the extracts from each specific algorithm. So FlowClean basically bins with shifts in population distribution, while FlowAI bins with outliers in flow rate, signal acquisition, and dynamic range, while Peacock bins with events easily separable from the rest of the data and that deviates from the median peak density. Does FlowClean or FlowAI give you, do FlowClean or FlowAI give you a warning if something was wrong? No, but Peacock does, because it will show you if there is a monotonic increase or decrease in signal. When this can happen, for example, if the instrument wasn't cleaned enough, or wasn't cleaned really well before you processed your samples or you acquired your samples, what can happen is that there is an accumulation of, let's say, dyes or antibodies within the instrument. So the fluorescent signal could be really high at the beginning if you have the same fluorescence within your panel, and then slowly decrease, okay? And this could not be given from the fact that the expression is changing, but just from an accumulation of the reagent within the instrument itself. Which kind of report do we have? FlowClean does not create any visual report. FlowAI gives us a visual report, and as well as for Peacock. Which kind of data can we analyze with these three different algorithms? FlowClean will only be working with flow cytometry data. FlowAI can be applied to flow cytometry data and mass cytometry data without flow rate. And then Peacock can be applied to both of them, so flow cytometry and mass cytometry data. When on which parameters do I use that? FlowClean and FlowAI needs to be used on raw data, which means whatever you get out from the instrument And I will show you in a more clear way now that I open up FlowJo, while Peacock will work on compensated parameters. So I've just reported right here the 3 examples from the 3 algorithms. So let's consider that we have a raw data that looks like this. Clearly, something happened right here. We need to exclude this region, okay? Or we need to remove at least the events that are included in this region. So either we go with a time gate manually and we risk of losing something, or we start using these algorithms. Now, if we use FlowClean, we see that there is a 4% removal of events. So FlowClean looks quite open, let's say, okay, not that stringent when we use it on this data set. While when we use FlowAI, we realize that there is a 38% removal of the events, which is kind of a lot, right? And that's because FlowAI is way more stringent than FlowClean, because it performs 3 different checks. And maybe this is given to the fact that there are these checks performed rather than just checking the flow rate, okay? While when we use Peacock, we see that Peacock kind of stays in the middle within FlowAI and FlowClean. So one of the questions that I usually get is, so which one do I use and which one is the best? Now, we can't give you this answer right here, and we cannot decide for you. What I always say, it's considering how many events can you afford to lose, okay? If you are working with, let's say, 2-3 million PBMCs, and you are looking at general populations and so on, you may afford to lose at least a bit more events compared to who's working with rare events, okay? So just keep in mind this when you run these algorithms, and consider the output, okay? So compare the output with what you are expecting, and don't forget that these algorithms are slightly fine-tunable. So you can fine-tune some of the parameters within the algorithm itself, but it's always better to use one rather than not using them at all. And another thing to keep in mind and to consider is if you are working with uncompensated data or compensated data. Now, when we say that within FlowJo, it does not mean that your data are not compensated. It means that you have to think of, do I perform my compensation on the instrument and then I just export my data into FlowJo and analyze that? Then in that case, you use FlowClean and FlowAI because they work on raw data, okay? So whatever you got from the instrument, or you perform compensation post-acquisition. In that case, if you have single stains and you do compensation after acquisition, then you are free to go and use Peacock for that, okay? So let me stop for a second before we go into the plugins on FlowJo. Okay, I see some questions. Hey, Lola. Just a curiosity, I saw some users using FlowClean and FlowAI on compensated data. Compensation done in Diva, yeah. Will this generate some sort of issues in terms that may remove more events or miss some? Have you tested it? Most of our data, or all of our data, are actually already compensated in Diva or in Chorus, depends. But that's what you actually use, okay? So this should not generate any sort of issue later on, okay? And then I see another one. Would you expect similar outcomes when running those plugins on different computers? Yes, absolutely. The outcome does not depend on the computer. And wherever you run FlowJo, whatever you do a FlowJo on PC and Mac is the same. because the application is the same. So you shouldn't see any different output from them. And if you run them multiple times, you should get always the same output. Okay, then I have another question. Hi, Serena. Hi, Stefan. I ran separately FlowAI, FlowClean, Peacock, and for each of them, I got an error message saying that it's failed to produce expected the right parameter. I never had this issue. What could it be? Okay, if you never had this issue, you mean you're using the plugins in the latest version of FlowJo and you have the latest version of the plugins. So I always assume that people are using, or we try to assume that people are using the latest version of FlowJo and the latest version of the plugins. And that's because sometimes there are updates within the R library which do not depend on us. So we need to update the plugin itself as well. And the most updated plugins go with the most updated version of FlowJo. So when you have this kind of issue, maybe we can troubleshoot this offline if you send me an email and share the data, and I can test that on my computer and see if I have the same output. But that shouldn't be the case. I mean, this is my job. We troubleshoot things, and every time it's a different issue or maybe a different issue, but seeing the data helps me a lot to understand where the data is, where the data come from, which markers which fluorochromes you are using, which parameters are basically taken in account, and what could cause the issue. So this is more of it sounds to me more of a computer/data troubleshooting, because if you tested them on different data and they work, then this should be something related to your own specific data. But I need to look at the data. So you can send it to me. You have my email address. Okay, good. And then I have another one. Another question, which is, it is necessary to make compensation matrix for each individual experiment, or I can make a matrix for several fluorochromes once and use it every time I use some or all of the fluorochromes. The compensation matrix comes from each individual single stain. Okay, so in a beautiful word, what you may want to do is creating a new compensation matrix with your single stains every time you run a new experiment, which is a different day, for example. So that is the ideal, or what we should be doing. But if you have a compensation matrix set on the instrument, you can use that set on the instrument for that day. Okay. Okay, so I see something else. So you only recommend using Peacock if you have done unmixing. If you do manual compensation in Diva, you would use FlowClean or FlowAI, wouldn't you? Manual compensation, you mean compensation in Diva, you can use FlowClean or FlowAI. If you have done unmixing on the instrument and you export your data already with the correct compensation, you can use FlowAI and FlowClean on that as well. Okay, let me show you in a second. So there is no single best algorithm, as you can see also from our discussion, and I really like this interaction with you guys, and I really appreciate your questions. So one thing to keep in mind is that the quality control algorithms are tunable, and you should inspect which events were removed from your data and then adjust the sensitivity of the algorithm if needed. And I'm going to show you, in a second, okay? Because after we run quality check, we want to make sure to remove irrelevant events from our data. Not everyone works with blood cells, but still, we need to make sure that we clean up as much as possible from any debris or anything that is not needed within our analysis. So in this case, this is just an example to remove multiplets, debris, and dead cells. So if you can, and if your experiment allows that, please use a live and dead within your experiment so you're able to exclude dead cells, unless you work with dead cells. I had once a person that was working with dead cells, so she was looking at things within dead cells rather than in live cells. But this is, you know, a special experiment, and I can understand that. But if you can, you should always be using a live and dead. Okay, so now it's demo time. So I can show you how to use this within FlowJo. So first of all, if you want to download any of the algorithms, you may want to go to the FlowJo Exchange. You can access from FlowJo, or you can go on our webpage and connect to and click on the FlowJo Exchange right here. And then you can just type in the search area, plug and play. Let's see if it comes up. Yeah. Plug and play bundle right here. So you will have access to FlowAI, FlowClean, and Cytonorm, which I will show you in a second. And then you will need to click on the download button. When you click on the download button, you will have a zip folder. Okay, I have unzipped it here, and you have a jar file and a plugin folder, a PDF. So please read the PDF every time you download a plugin from the Exchange, for two reasons. One, because there are informations on how to install the plugin, okay, which is basically a copy and paste into the plugin folder. And then because you will find information on the use, and you will find details on the publication that was used for this, where, let's say, the publication of this algorithm specifically, how to use it, which are the outputs, and so on, okay? So all the informations that I shared with you are also available in the PDF of each plugin. So now, how do we use that within FlowJo? Okay, the first thing, you can add a sample, and you can add a sample from a location or from BD Research Cloud, up to you. So I can start just by adding one sample. And to the question, initial question, where is the check sample quality? It's right here under FlowJo, under the cytometry band, okay? Now, to inspect the file, you can just double click on the circle. And as you can see, this file has a gray matrix, which means that, which doesn't mean that it's not compensated, but it means that it's using the compensation from the instrument. So the so-called acquisition defined. So if you perform a mixing on the instrument, your data are still considered, let's say, raw in this case, so you can still use FlowAI and FlowClean. So if I double click on this, I will inspect the file. I can also use the check sample quality. Okay, and now I have a blue badge. But if I want to inspect it, here are all the informations that I get. So I have all the keywords on the left side, all the informations from the instrument, if I had CS and TBs, and so on, all the checks that were done, which are the parameters, which are the lasers, the instrument name, the date, and so on. You will have information regarding the parameter names and stains, and right here you will see the median of each parameter versus time. And as you can see, each value right here, each line, let's say these green lines, are all included into the 2 standard deviations. So FlowJo assumes that the quality of this sample is actually good. And this is the default way that you have available within FlowJo. In case you download Plug and Play, you may want to copy and paste the jar file into the plugin folder. Don't forget, these informations are in the PDF file that comes with it. And once you quit and reopen FlowJo, you will find them under the plugins list right here. Now, your list may be shorter than mine. That's not a problem. Okay. But what you want to do is start running, for example, FlowClean, okay? And FlowJo will tell you this workspace must be saved before we go on. Please say yes, okay? And save it on a location which is local and not on an external drive until you're doing your analysis, okay? Oops. So As you can see right here, you have a reference to the paper. If you want to go deeper into that, there is an automatic selection of the parameters. And underneath, you will find some parameters that can be fine-tuned. If you want to know more about these, you can hover over with your mouse and know exactly what is going to happen if you change these parameters. Usually, I start running these algorithms with the default parameters or with the default values, and then look if I need to fine-tune something or not. So then you can click OK, and it will start running. Now, just because for sake of time, I have made another workspace right here, but I will show you how to use all the algorithms anyway. And as you can see, I have a flow clean bad events and flow clean good events. So in this file specifically, I mean, these are training files, honestly. So there were 0% of events removed. But when I ran FlowAI, and I show you how to run FlowAI, okay, so you go again under Workspace, Plugins, FlowAI. If you have run another plugin already, what you will find is an automatic selection of the derived parameters from that. But you should remove this, okay? So if you have something like FlowClean, FlowAI, and Peacock, because you already ran these algorithms on this workspace, you will find them in the list, but you have to remove them. Once I run FlowAI, I have different options right here. I can choose which are the anomalies to exclude from all checks, or just from the flow rate and signal acquisition, or just from the flow rate and dynamic range, and so on. Now, one thing to consider in this case is that if you generate a change of the flow rate, let's say you go from low to high, and then again from high to low, and from low to high, so you basically are shifting this flow rate, you are moving this flow rate, consider that the algorithm will find that, will see that, and will automatically exclude all the events in this interval of time. So the more you change the flow rate in this case, the more events will be removed. So just keep in mind that when you run these algorithms, because if you did that, probably you want to either not check the flow rate, okay, or not exclude the anomalies coming from the flow rate because you did that manually on purpose, or, oops, spoiler, or instead of using FlowAI, for example, you could use FlowClean, okay? And you can also choose to remove outliers or not. So ideally, yes, and then you click OK, and you will have the output. The output in my case gave me 36% removal, and this is a different file, okay? On this different file, which is bigger, and that's why I ran it already on a workspace to save time, because FlowClean, for example, it's really slow compared to FlowAI, so it takes longer than that. So in this case, you see the outputs from all of them. I ran FlowClean and I had 0% removal. I ran FlowAI and I had 36% removal. When I ran Peacock, I had 3.8% removal of events. Now, to run Peacock, you will need to download and install that separately. Okay, and when you run it, you will be prompted as well with the selection of the correct parameters right here. You can select if these data are coming from side-off or not, and you can also choose to add QC images to the layout, which is what I did basically. So when I look at my output, this is the output that I got from FlowClean automatically in my from Peacock automatically in my layout. Everything seems okay. When I look at the output from FlowAI, this is the same that I showed you in the presentation. I can see how the flow rate was changed, the removal of marginal events, of events from the dynamic range, and then I see the median intensity value. Okay. And then what you can do is overlaying bad events and good events and see where they are located. So I did that in advance, but it's basically just dragging and dropping your raw data right here, your raw sample right here, and plotting a physical parameter versus time. Okay, so now this is what I see, the good events of flow clean, it's 100%, so it doesn't really matter if I overlay my bad events or not, because I have 0 bad events. But for Flow AI, these are basically the good events that were kept, while the bad events, the alterations were removed. Right here, you see good events and bad events individually, and then an overlay between bad events and good events. And finally, with Peacock, I see basically the overlay of bad events and good events right here. Okay, from there, you can take your good events from whatever you choose, and then within your good events, you can start gating, okay? And so on. This one, or could be this one, whatever you prefer. Okay, so now I can have my side versus forward, and then just start gating from there. So take your cells, remove debris, take single cells, remove doublets, okay? And then remove dead cells. So in this case, I have a marker that is expressed from dead cells. So I want to take the cells that are not expressing that marker. Okay. Let's see. Are the red dots in Peacock due to the remove margin option? Now, the remove margin, I had it in Flow AI, not Peacock. Okay. So if there are no other questions, we'll move on. Oh, I need to hurry up. Okay, so this, ideally, you do signal stability check and then clean up when you don't have to normalize, okay? When you don't have batch effects to correct. Now, in this, oops, okay, never mind. When you have batch effects, like in some cases, you may have batch effects, you can use one of these 3 algorithms right here. So first of all, let's say what is batch effect. Basically, longitudinal studies or collection of files can, or of samples can have technical variability, or you can see technical variability across samples. This variability can either come from the instruments, so intra-instrument or inter-instruments. If you are running, for example, let's say a longitudinal study within different locations, even though you have the same instrument, you may have some inter-instrument variability coming from there. Or this variability can come from processing. Some people process samples in a different way, or let's say my pipetting would never be the same every day, as well as the pipetting of another person, and so on. And finally, they can come from reagents, for example. There may be differences from lots to lots. So this technical variability can hinder determining if differences are due to biology or actually batch effects, which are like technical issues. These variabilities, if are not corrected, they are visible in dimensionality reduction plots, so they're extremely clear. When you have something like that, you can't discriminate anything in your t-SNE, and then you send me an email saying, I don't understand anything what's going on with my sample, and then I start asking you questions about the processing of the sample, and it turns out that there was a technical variability. And we should always consider that experiments are expensive and clinical samples are actually limited most of the times. Okay, I have a question. I will answer that later. Okay. So how can we minimize this batch effect? Let's face it, the point is always try to standardize your experiment as much as possible. So we can minimize instrument variability because the instrument itself can correct signal fluctuations over time. But this, let's say, correction will not capture sample prep variability. And that could be as well site-to-site variability, as I said before, between instruments. Regarding the processing, we should standardize reagents and sample prep. But again, there may be differences in reagent slots or processing steps from people to people. So that's from person to person. So that's quite normal. And regarding the batching processing, we should spread groups across different batches. But in this case, we know that samples from different groups may not be available at the same time. And we should try to merge samples into a single run. But even in this case, we may be limited on the number of samples, and the samples itself may not be available at the same time when we run it. So what we can do, first of all, in this beautiful figure right here, there is one sentence which I like, which is normalize only when necessary. Why do you want to do that? Because if you do have small biological differences, you may lose that with normalization. Okay, so with this being said, we do have few tools for normalization and are cytonorm, cycombine, or MML. These tools basically model the batch effect and apply normalization, and what they give you in return will be corrected files or parameters. And here is an example of how the different batches look for CD3, for example, before and after normalization. And as you can see, we try to normalize the signal for each marker across different batches. Okay. Now, cytonorm is one of the most used probably algorithms for normalization. It was also let's say the oldest one, even though it's quite new. Was developed by Sophie van Gassen, who some of you may know. And what it does, it basically models the batch effect in a reference sample, such as technical replicates, and then returns normalized files. One thing to keep in mind when you use cytonorm is that you need an internal control. You need a control sample basically for each batch, which means that every time that you run a batch, you need to have a control. This control ideally should be the same for all your batches. And one thing could be that we have a unique control that we aliquot and freeze, and then we thaw every time we run a new batch, okay? So the steps are listed right here. There is the reference to the paper. If you need to know more, I only have 3 minutes left. I will be going on 5 minutes extra, or 5 to 10 minutes extra, because I want to walk you through this anyway. But maybe for the steps, I would ask you to check the reference. Okay, I will give you a really big overview on how they work. So taking the control files creates an aggregate control sample, and then it runs a clustering algorithm on that. So basically a FlowSum meta algorithm on that. And then for every meta cluster and for every marker, it computes the quantiles for each replicate of the control sample. So here you see the marker expression, and here are the quantiles. And then choose the goal quantile, so basically the distribution, and compute splines for each replicate of the control sample. So the goal is to have a smooth function translating from the original values to the new values that have the goal distribution. And then it goes to the actual sample and match the other files on the same FlowSum tree, as you can see here. And then for every meta cluster and for every marker, apply the spline from the corresponding control sample. So basically creates the clustering on the control samples, tries to adjust everything on the control samples, and then applies their adjustments, let's say, or embeds the new samples or the actual samples onto the control. So to give you an example, if you're doing high dimensional analysis, this is one of the things that you may see, okay? If you are in this situation where you see your cells are all spread or your events are all spread in different islands, that couldn't be given to the fact that your t-SNE is not working or you're mad at FlowJo because it's not working really well, but could be given from the fact that you have a batch effect. The batch effect, if you consider some things that could happen, could be, for example, that you created a mix in the morning, okay, an antibody mix in the morning, and then you use that mix all day, waiting for the samples to come, okay? So every time that was coming a sample, you were staining the sample and then processing at the instrument. Now, the mix has been there all day, okay? And that's important. So you should make a new mix for every time you run a sample or you run a batch of samples, okay? One more thing could be, I don't know, maybe your antibody has been outside of the fridge, or your sample came over the weekend and you didn't have time to process the sample on Friday night, and then you just left the sample in the fridge for like 2 extra days, and then you came Monday morning and you pulled everything together, and then you see this kind of output right here. And this is for sure a batch effect. So when you have correction of batch effect, actually each event goes to the correct island, or ideally that is what should happen. And this is just an example of each of some parameters normalized. As you can see here, they try to align the different parameters, okay, within different samples. You see batch 1, 2, and 3 in different colors overlaying right here. What else do we have? We have one other algorithm, which is called cycombine. Cycombine does not need an internal control because it works on a concatenated file. So let's say that you have multiple samples that you acquired, let's say in different days, for example, and you want to evaluate or you want to, let's minimize the batch effect that you have within these samples acquired in different days. In this case, you could use cycombine, especially if you don't have a control sample. And what happens is that you have a reduction of the batch effect for the clusters of similar cells while also considering the cell heterogeneity. So the first step is to identify the batches and then evaluate the expression values arc-syn transformed, and then it performs the clustering. So compared to cytonorm, the clustering is done after that, and it's still a flow-sum clustering, a sum clustering, but then applies one other algorithm, which is called combat, to normalize the rest, okay, the full data set, let's say. So now the math behind that, I would be too cocky to say that I really know the math behind that, because I'm a PhD as a background. I'm not a bioinformatician, but if you want to know exactly how the math works behind that, you have a reference right here. What is the output that we get? We get a normalized concatenated file, and also we have metrics for interbatch and intrabatch variability after the correction. And the last one that we have available for normalization, it's called MNN, mutual nearest neighbor. And in this case, identify cells that have mutually similar expression profiles within batches. And as you can see here, this is a visual example of what happens. So if we have 2 different batches, we have similar cells in pink, similar cells in red and in blue. And then these 2 batches are compared. So it tries to match the same cells within batches, okay? So here you can see that it finds a match for the blue population and for the red population, but there is no match for the pink and yellow population. So the next step is to correct everything that is matching within the red and blue population, and then add these 2 other populations to the batch. So it creates a new reference batch that will be used to compare the following batch. As you can see here, batch 3. So finally, in batch 3, there is a corresponding population to the yellow one, and it starts correcting that as well. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, I will show you this one first, and then I will show you the workspaces. So how you can normalize in FlowJo, there are 3 different ways. One is by using Cytonorm. Cytonorm is a workspace plugin. It comes with the plugin play bundle. You need to add a batch keyword when you run it. That could be, for example, run ID, and you need to have controls for each batch, okay? So when you run it, you will be prompted with a window where you select which are the controls among your files. And then what it gives you in return are normalized files. And I will show you in FlowJo in a second. SciCombine instead is a standalone plugin. So you will need to download that from the web page. You need to concatenate your files by using a batch keyword that even in this case can be a run ID, batch ID, whatever you want. And in return, we'll give you a really nice visual output, which includes the density plots for each batch and marker, okay? And returns you a normalized concatenated file that you can then use on your high dimensional analysis, for example. And finally, MNN is as well a standalone plugin, so you need to download it and install it. Even in this case, when you create your concatenated file, you need to have a batch keyword. And as an output, it will not give you a concatenated file, but it returns normalized parameters that you can then use on your analysis. Okay. So normalization tools operate on assumptions about the technical replicates of biological variability that should be as well considered before applying them to your data. So in case, it's much better to avoid normalization if you can, okay? So I can close this one. Let's see. Okay, I have one question here, which is, will the program calculate the results again each time I will open the workspace? No, if you specifically do this thing, you remove the node, okay? These are called nodes. These are the derived parameters. These are the nodes. If you remove the node of Peacock, of FlowClean, or FlowAI, the next time that you open the workspace, it will not recalculate. And this is true for every plugin that you use in FlowJo. So if you do your analysis and you're happy with that, you can remove the nodes from any of the plugins that you use in FlowJo. So you don't need to recalculate every time. Okay. Now, I ran Cytonorm on my samples, but I want to show you how to run it. Okay, so you will have a new workspace. Ideally, you have downloaded Plug and Play. So if you do that, and as I mentioned, this is a workspace plugin, so you need to have it to run it before you load your samples. So if you go on workspace and then plugins, and then you can click on add workspace plugin right here. FlowJo will suggest you Cytonorm, you say yes, and then you select the samples that you want to normalize. Let's say that I want to normalize my 4 batches. I have 4 different batches with 2 samples each. Yes. Okay. So I can click open. And now I will tell him, these are my control. I have 2 different batches with 4 samples each. Okay, so these are my controls. And then the batch will be batch 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I have each control for each batch. And then the reference to normalize would be the sample in batch 1, the second sample in batch 2, in batch 3, and in batch 4. So I have a relative sample in each batch that I want to normalize to my control. So then you can click OK. And what you will be prompted with will be a new workspace. Okay. That should look like this one, kind of. You will have the Cytonorm normalized group, which will include your normalized sample. And you can define that by seeing this norm before the file name. And here I have my different groups. So I have my control group where I have my LD1 in 4 different batches because these are 4 different conditions, and my original ones that I want to normalize 4 different batches as well. So when I have my normalized files, now these are basically my original, as you see, LD2. My original was LD2. And I have the normalized files right here. You can compare what happened during or after the normalization. I just made this for you guys. And you can see, for example, for CD4, these are my original files and these are my normalized files. So I basically aligned the intensity for CD4 for all the different batches, okay? But now this can be tricky if you have small biological differences that you want to see. And you may lose these differences when you normalize because you are basically aligning everything, while for other markers, nothing happened, basically, okay? While for cycombine and MNN, okay, let's show you first cycombine. So I have my 8 samples, originally my 4 controls and 4 respective samples in the 4 different batches. I can create a concatenated file. Okay, so what I would do, I would select all the samples, clean up first in this case. Okay, so you don't want to use also your debris to normalize. So the more you clean up, the better it is. And as you see, I have only the lymphocytes here that I'm concatenating. So if you want to do a concatenated file in FlowJo, you will select all of your samples, go on your work on file, export concatenate population. Here you have the concatenate step, and then please do not forget to add as additional parameter the batch keyword that you used. So I used ID, which is right here, okay? Do not spread the distribution of the keyword data, and then you can concatenate. So clean up, create a keyword, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are my 4 batches, 1, 2, 3, and 4, sample 1 from batch 1, sample 2 from batch 1. And then you basically have this merged file right here, which is a concatenated file of all of your samples, okay, or all of your populations. When you run cycombine, what you will get in return will be a normalized file, as you can see here, where you can work on, or you can generate high dimensional analysis. You can run TSNE or UMAP on that. Please double check that the transformation is correct on your normalized file. And as an output, what you will get will be these super nice density plots where you can see for each batch and each marker what was corrected and what was not corrected. Okay, while if you run cycombine, oh, sorry, I didn't show you how to run that. Cycombine, how to run it, okay? It's a standalone plugin, so you will need to download it and install it. So let's say I want to run it. Oops, workspace, plugins. I have it right here, cycombine. Yeah, of course. Let's do this if, okay? Then, which are the markers that you want, the parameters that you want to normalize? Ideally, most of the parameters that you used. Maybe if you cleaned up already, you don't want to normalize those parameters as well. One important thing to mention is that based on the kind of data that you are running, you need to select a specific arcsine factor. So if you are using side-off data, you will select 5, and you have a tip right here when you go on here, but please remember to do that. If you are using traditional flow cytometry, you will set 150, which is the default one. But if you're using spectral, you will use arcsine factor of 6,000, okay? And then you need to select the parameter that identifies the batches. And so in my case, is the ID word, keyword right here, okay? While if you run MNN, you go on plugins, click on MNN, same thing, select the parameters that you want to normalize. Okay. And then even here, you will need to select the batch ID keyword. So this one ID right here, and then you can click OK. What is the difference when you run it on the, when you run MNN on the concatenated file, you will have normalized parameters right here, which are named as MNN. So these are the derived parameters that you will start looking at into your file. Okay. Okay, so I ran 15 minutes over. So in summary, technical anomalies and variability in your data can hinder interpretation of your results. Sample quality can be assessed within FlowJo and post-acquisition anomalies removed. And you can use FlowClean, FlowAI, or Peacock based on what we have said. And batch effects as well can be corrected with either cytonorm, cycombine, or MNN, but should be minimized with really good standardization practices. So keep in mind, good panel, good protocols. The more you standardize, the better it is, the more is the chance that you can avoid normalization in this case, or correction of batch effects with normalization. Okay, so if you have more questions, for some reason, this doesn't show up. This is flowjo@bd.com, which is our technical support, and this is my email address. And if you do have 5 minutes today, we are running a cyto survey just on the pre-processing steps. So as you can understand, this is not really standardized yet. So any input or any knowledge on what people are doing and how they are doing, that would be helpful. So questions? Sorry, I ran 15 minutes late. I didn't expect that. Okay, so if there are no questions, maybe there's one. Oh, thank you. Great. I'm really glad that you found this webinar useful. Keep in mind, it's recorded in case you need to rewatch it. It's an overview, so if you want to go deeper, you have the references in the webinar. And yeah, great. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. I see you at the next webinar. I don't know when it's going to be, but hopefully soon. Bye-bye.